Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Ballerina, starring Anna de Armas, Ian McShane, Angelica Houston, Gabriel Byrne, Catalina Sandino Marino, Ava Joyce McCarthy, Julia Doherty, Lance Reddick, Norman Reedus, and Keanu Reeves, directed by Len Wiseman. Now, why is there a new John Wick movie that's directed by the guy that did Underworld? Is beyond me, but and I will get to his Live Free or Die Hard at some point, but yeah, it's kind of a struggle going through this movie. So let's just get straight into it, shall we? We open with the sound of Swan Lake as young Eve McCarroll thinks about her father's death as he's killed by some assassins. And the action is being done by Chad Stahelski, who directed the four John Wick films, because director Len Wiseman can't direct action worth a shit, as the Chancellor, played by Gabriel Byrne, is the one who killed Eve's father with one bullet as her father tries to kill the Chancellor to save Eve's life. And this piece of action in the first 10 minutes of the movie sets up the movie's plot good, but not well enough, in my opinion. After her father's death, Eve is approached by Winston, returned by Ian McShane from the previous John Wick movies, as he takes her to a school to become a ballerina, which is the title of the movie in particular, and he takes her to the director, returned by Angelica Houston, from part 3, as she trains her to be a ballerina, and Nogi trains her to be an assassin herself, while we move on to 12 years later with Eve as an adult, played by Anna de Armas, whom I enjoyed in Knives Out to Blade Runner 2049, both movies I reviewed before, as she struggles to keep her feet up versus trained as an assassin. And I must say, I really enjoy watching Anna de Armas in this role as the ballerina, as she kicks ass in this role, just like Keanu Reeves did in John Wick. Eve trains harder and harder to become an assassin herself, from fight moves to with the gun fu, and she has to fight like a girl, which is the movie's theme, including the song by Evanescence in the credits, as Eve sees her roommate Tatiana is gone because the director got rid of her, as she has sadness. And Eve is led to believe she's ready for action, and she interrogates someone who will be her 10 years from now, as Eve shoots her dead, and the girls, including Eve, sees the Baba Yaga, aka John Wick, returned by Keanu Reeves himself. With this time very little to do in this movie, as this movie takes place in between parts 3 and 4, and Eve asks him how to become the assassin he says he is, and he says, looks like you already have, and the door is unlocked, which makes sense for this movie's purposes. Nogi gives Eve her first assignment with rubber bullets to protect Katla Park, in a club she goes to get her out of the club, as some assassins come in, and she sees some men becoming a threat to Katla, and she fights the bad guys and shoots the motherfuckers down. What is it with this series in clubhouses and fighting in them? I mean, it works for John Wick, but in this movie, it's getting pretty old after a while, as she crashes to some brutal places, but it's not over the top like it was in John Wick. But Eve saves Katla's life, and we move on to Eve getting tattooed in the back, and 2 months later, she is on a mission to go after the Chancellor, and gets money transferred and collects her weapons, which was kind of funny to me. Eve gets in a car to only get crashed and fights some assassins, and the action sequences are done better by Chad Stahelski than director Len Wiseman, as he can't direct action scenes worth of shit, like I said, after Underworld and Live Free or Die Hard, which I'll get to later this year, as she yells at the director about how she knows who her bad guy is. And she leaves and goes to the Continental to ask for Winston. And she speaks with him about going after the Chancellor, and it starts with Daniel Pine, played by Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead, along with his daughter Ella, played by Ava Joyce McCarthy. And the cinematography is pretty good in this movie, as this is shot pretty good. Eve gets to the hotel she's staying at, as she requests the room next door to Daniel's, and she goes to his room to talk until some assassins come in, while Daniel tries to protect Ella, as does Eve when the assassins try to kill both Eve and Daniel because a woman, Lena, played by Catalina Sandino Marino, doubles the contract to kill Daniel, and she and Eve fight each other off, and Daniel saves Ella's life and takes Eve with them, and he trades to protect Ella for Daniel, telling Eve where the Chancellor is at. And she makes that deal, and Daniel fights and gets killed by, well, briefly, by an assassin, losing the deal. And do we need the spinoff? Absolutely not, in my opinion. Eve is captured by the security of the hotel, and they almost kill her as they ask her to check out the hotel, and goes to a shop where she gets some guns, lots of guns, as she wants to go hunting, and some assassins come in the shop as she throws a box of grenades in the basement and continuously throws grenades, which was an awesome one-shotted action scene. And I have to confess, with an exception of the action scenes on my first viewing, I was falling asleep, not because it was not because I was bored, but I was more tired as I saw this in a regular chaired theater, recliner chair at a theater at 7 o'clock p.m. early access show. And the shop owner shows Eve where to find the Chancellor in the middle of a snowy mountain in a small town, and Eve goes in a restaurant to get some coffee in her until some assassins come in, and these scenes work for an action movie. The assassins attack Eve while the manager of the restaurant calls the assassins to stop Eve as she kills them left to right, and the restaurant manager fights Eve off with some plates, which was all over the top, and Eve traps the restaurant manager in the fucking refrigerator while the director knows what Eve is up to, and some assassins come in to look for Eve as she kills every single fucking last one of them as Eve gets stabbed in the back, literally, and she runs outside while other assassins look for Eve, and she's the suspect, and once again kills every single fucking assassin in the area. And this action sequence was fun and a tad bit over the top, and Lena happens to be there to knock Eve out while the Chancellor has Ella in his house to calm her down, while she says she hates him, and he learns they've got Eve alive, and then they interrogate her about why is she where the Chancellor is at, which is in his town. And we learn Daniel was his son, and why the fuck does he want Daniel dead? Because he doesn't take kindly to traitors, as Eve wants vengeance towards the Chancellor. And I liked how snowy the mountain is shot, as it looks beautiful. The audience learns Lena is Eve's sister when she doesn't want to believe it, and they fight once more, and Lena tells Eve she's her sister, and Lena thought Eve was dead for the longest time, and the Chancellor killed her father for keeping Eve away from him. And all of his family drama isn't what this series is supposed to be about, as this isn't the best John Wick movie in my opinion, as Lena is killed by the Chancellor, but Eve survives the grenade attack, and Gabriel Byrne does a good job at portraying the nasty villain, as Eve attacks his assassins, and Eve responds to the Chancellor's calling of his if it's done yet, and the Chancellor calls the director to send an assassin over after Eve to call her off until midnight, and the director calls the Baba Yaga, aka John Wick, to stop Eve, but will it work? I'll get to that in the climax, as some of the editing in this 30 minutes could have been cut out and put in the editing room floor. Eve encounters John as the director to tell her to leave town before she refuses, and have a brief fight sequence, which was a good action scene between Ana de Armas and Keanu Reeves for what little he does in this movie until she makes her proposition to him, and she says let her finish this by midnight, and they say rules and consequences, like in the previous John Wick films, and John lets her finish it off as she kills the Chancellor's guards, and he calls his town people to hunt down Eve, and Eve kills people with an ice skate, which was brutal for damn sure. And she continues to go after the Chancellor and gets a flamethrower, and the Chancellor sends him in with a goddamn flamethrower as well. And this is going to get good, but I like the fight between Ana de Armas and Keanu Reeves, and some of this action is brutal as hell, just like any of the John Wick films in general. Eve starts burning some motherfuckers up as the Chancellor's guard comes in with the flamethrower, and they try to burn each other in the most over-the-top way possible as the guards get burned in the leg, and or she does anyways. Oh, no, he does, I'm sorry. And Eve gets burned in the back, but it goes out anyways. How? I don't know, as it makes no sense, but she burns some of the guards down as one with the flamethrower goes with after Eve, and she's jumping into a building, and she's thinking, how can I fight the fire and beat the guard while I'm out of flame? And a water hose from a fire station while Eve fights fire with water and kills the guard with the flamethrower, and John kills that motherfucker dead and beats up the Chancellor's guards as Ella is being transported by the Chancellors. And this is a kick-ass time at the movies. Eve catches up with the Chancellor as well as Ella and shoots the last guard dead and confronts the Chancellor, and he monologues about being chosen, until Eve shoots the Chancellor dead and rescues Ella and takes her to hand. And John tells the director the Chancellor is dead, and the director is fine with it. And Eve takes Ella to the hospital where Daniel is held at, and Daniel is alive somehow. And she checks into the Continental with Winston and Sharon, returned one last time by Lance Reddick, and sees the performance of Swan Lake at the theater until she leaves because she's becoming the hunted. And the climax makes me interested in what's going to happen next for her. But did I like this movie? Let's talk about it. I'll give this movie a 7.1 out of 10. Not as good as the previous John Wick movies, as the first 10 minutes sets up the movie's plot good, but not well enough in my opinion, as I enjoy watching Ana de Armas in this role as the ballerina, and she kicks ass in the role like Keanu Reeves kicks ass in the John Wick movies, including here for what little he does in this movie. And fighting in the clubhouse worked for John Wick, but here it's getting old really fast in my opinion. Chad Stahelski directs these action sequences better than Len Wiseman, who can't direct action scenes worth a shit after Underworld and Live Free or Die Hard, which I'll get to later this year. I already did Underworld, but Die Hard I'll get to later this year. As both were bad movies, but this one is one of his decent movies for the plot, and Stahelski's action sequences, which wasn't over the top as in part 3, and the cinematography was pretty good in this movie in my opinion, as this is shot pretty good. I have to confess, there were times I fell asleep on my first viewing, but kept on waking my ass up on my eyes, as my eyes were tired at the time. But this was a good time at the movies, and don't get me wrong, this is a recommendation for those that are fans of the John Wick series, as this won't bore them, and it wasn't I was bored. The truth is, I felt tired while viewing this movie the first time, but admittedly, I went to a 7 o'clock p.m. showing in a recliner chair that typically makes me fall asleep. And I did like this movie, and it's a kick-ass time at the movies, and it works for an action movie, but it's not over the top like the John Wick movies. So I'd like to thank you guys for returning to the John Wick series, and until then, until we ever get another one, you wanted me back. I'm back.